Tonight, ongoing drug war. A murdered woman had ties to organized crime. Auto crime. Mounties ask the public for help to prevent vehicle thefts. And measles outbreak. Cases now discovered in Peace River. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. And we begin tonight with new information about the murder of a Dawson Creek woman. Emily Ogden's death is being connected to the ongoing drug turf war that's gripped the city over the past 2 years. Now, CJDC-TV News has learned her remains were discovered last Monday near 231 Road in Eris. 2 suspects were brought in for questioning after her body was discovered. They were released without being charged. The male suspect is known to police. He was the target of a violent home invasion in February of 2024. Ogden was charged in connection to that incident. Sources close to the investigation, speaking on the condition of anonymity, say it's believed she was there to steal drugs and money. The victim was allegedly hit in the face with a sawed-off shotgun and sent to hospital. Well, police were back at that same house over the long weekend searching for evidence. The home was one of 4 scenes around Dawson Creek area that police had secured since the 24-year-old's death. Now, Ogden was connected to organized crime in Dawson Creek. The RCMP division is leading the investigation, and they're asking anyone with any information to contact police. Mounties in Fort St. John are thanking the public for their help in identifying 2 youth. Police say back on April the 3rd, the 2 boys allegedly removed some glass from the Norpiece Cultural Center in the 10,000 block of 100th Avenue. Investigators say the glass was then smashed in the parking lot of the building. Mounties not saying how or where the 2 boys were identified. They did say their investigation into the matter is continuing. Well, April is Auto Crime Prevention Month in BC, and that's why Mounties in Fort St. John are reminding drivers to do their part to prevent vehicle theft. A vehicle is broken into every 12 minutes in British Columbia. Well, the theme of this year's initiative is Rethink. It's an acronym for tips to prevent auto crime, starting with removing valuables and ending with keeping track of your keys. In the first 3 months of the year, there have been 87 reports involving theft of or theft from vehicles in Fort St. John. That's up from 64 last year. Tremblay Elementary in Dawson Creek is one of 25 schools across British Columbia to receive money from the province for safe and accessible playgrounds. Victoria is providing $200,000 to each school district for the playground through Budget 2025.
For the 8th consecutive year, our BC government is providing $5 million through the Playground Equipment Program to support 25 school districts with additional new playgrounds for their schools.
The province says investments like this have been a priority since forming government back in 2017. They add it's approved more than $6 billion for hundreds of school capital projects during that time. A significant jump in the number of measles cases in Alberta. 29 new cases were confirmed over the Easter long weekend, with the total count now at 118. The outbreak has hit Alberta's Peace region. Alberta Health Services is warning that people may have been exposed to the highly contagious virus at the emergency department at the hospital in Peace River. The central and south health zones in Alberta continue to see the highest number of cases. Children between the ages of 5 and 17 are the largest target group testing positive, but the number of adults with confirmed cases is now up to 17. Alberta Health says the best protection against measles is to make sure you have 2 doses of the vaccine. 5 former members of Canada's World Junior Hockey team pled not guilty to sexual assault today. They entered the pleas as jury selection began in a London, Ontario courtroom. CTV's Adrian Gabriel reports.
One by one, 5 players of the 2018 gold medal winning World Junior Hockey team arrived flanked by their lawyers. Dylan Dubé, Cal Foote, Carter Hart, Michael McLeod, and Alex Fermenton have each been charged with sexual assault. McLeod is also facing 1 charge of being party to the offense. Inside a courtroom, rows of 5 separate tables for each of the accused lined one side of the room. When asked to address the court, each stood and pleaded not guilty. Justice Maria Caracia then moved forward with selecting 14 jurors from a group of 200 sitting in a separate courtroom.
You know very little about the potential jurors. You know occupation, you know age, you know general area that they live in, but you don't know very much about them.
One person who will have their identity and credibility called into question by the defense is the alleged victim, who's expected to be called to the stand as early as this Friday.
A lot of times in these sexual assault cases, it comes down to the word and the testimony of the complainant.
The alleged group sexual assault took place inside this London, Ontario hotel in June of 2018 following a Hockey Canada gala. A lawsuit filed in April of 2022 states that the alleged female victim met a group of young men at a bar following the gala and had consensual sex with one of the players. She alleges that afterwards, 7 others entered the hotel room and, quote, directed, manipulated, and intimidated her into remaining in the room where she says she was sexually assaulted.
It's always difficult for the Crown to prove these cases because at the end of the day, it is proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Today we also heard a list of more than 40 names of potential witnesses. Some of those who could be taking the stand include members of that World Junior Hockey team who haven't been charged, some of which were playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, London, Ontario.
Well, to the federal election, where all of the parties have now released their costed platforms, and the leaders have been throwing around some very big numbers. CTV's Colton Prell has the details.
Less than a week before Election Day, the Conservatives unveiled their party platform.
This is my plan for change. First, we will cut the Liberal deficit by 70%.
Headlined by $35 billion of new spending and $75 billion in tax cuts, Pierre Poilievre won't balance the budget, but is the only leader who says he can lower Canada's deficit from current projections. The Conservatives promising to bring it down to $14 billion in 4 years' time.
Canadians have been pinching their pennies long enough. It's time for government to start pinching pennies as well.
His opponents are skeptical. Mark Carney's plan includes more spending over 4 years and a much bigger deficit, but he says that's because he didn't include expected revenue like the Conservatives. Carney argues he would reach a surplus in 5 years if he did.
We are in a crisis, and in a crisis you always plan for the worst, you don't hope for the best. And so you don't make those types of assumptions.
Economists criticized the accounting in both plans, saying neither the Liberals nor Conservatives use a baseline that properly takes tariffs into effect.
If you add in the tariff damage and if you took out these induced effects, all of them project pretty sizable deficits going forward and a maintenance of our high debt to GDP burden.
Meanwhile, the NDP say both parties aren't investing enough in people.
You know, both of them, I think, don't have the right priorities when it comes to spending that type of money on millionaires and then proposing massive cuts for you and your family. I think that's the wrong priority.
Singh's platform has the highest amount of new spending, but counters that with extensive revenue gains from taxes on wealthy people and businesses.
And while voters crunch these numbers, there's one more to make note of. A record 7.3 million people are estimated to have voted in advance polls. That's roughly a quarter of all registered voters at the start of the campaign. Colton Prale, CTV News, Ottawa.
And staying with advance voting, many of the people who came out over the long weekend to cast a ballot say the threat coming from the United States is the major factor in their vote.
I think it's been kind of a chaotic last few months. I think a lot of Canadians are watching the events that our American neighbors are going through with a large amount of trepidation, and I think there's a considerable concern about seeing anything similar happen in Canada.
Well, we look at what's happening south of the border, and it's a bit frightening, to say the least. And so, yeah, I am anxious.
Once again, incumbent Bob Zimmer is expected to win the riding of Prince George Peace River Northern Rockies, but polls show a close race between the Liberals and Conservatives in the rest of BC, with several ridings still considered to be toss-up. As the faithful begin to gather in Rome for Saturday's funeral, Pope Francis is now laying in state in an open casket inside the chapel of the papal residency. And today we saw the cardinals begin to congregate as they map out the next steps to choose a new leader for the Catholic Church. Geneviève Beauchemin reports.
A glimpse of the people's Pope Francis lying in state here in the chapel at Casa Santa Marta, where he lived simply and passed away. Vatican employees and those closest to the pontiff were first to pay tribute. Among them, Vatican analyst Gerard O'Connell.
After more than 20 years, knowing him as a friend, to know now he's no longer a friend on earth, he's a friend in heaven.
The Vatican has released some of the details of the Pope's final hours. He rested in the afternoon, had an early dinner. He thanked his health assistant for granting him his wish to ride through St. Peter's Square. And then, in the early morning hours Monday, he suddenly passed away. Hundreds of thousands are expected to pay their respects in accordance with the age-old rituals and traditions of the Catholic Church. In the crowd today, a group from Canada, from the Holy Spirit Parish in Stittsville, Ontario.
The world lost quite a guy. I mean, he was, always for the poor.
They had planned to be here for the church's Jubilee celebrations, but are now focusing their pilgrimage on the Pope.
We hope to be here tomorrow, line up early and be able to pay our respects to someone we admired and loved.
Cardinals from around the globe have been called to Rome and held a first meeting to lay out the timeline for the ceremonies. The Pope's body will be moved to St. Peter's Basilica for the public viewing that will last 3 days. The funeral will be held Saturday.
He simplified the ceremony to say, let's make it like any ordinary Christian.
A procession will then take the Pope's body to St. Mary Major for burial in a simple wooden coffin in accordance with the Pope's final wishes, near an icon of the Virgin Mary he admired in a basilica where he often prayed. So many here say they hope to take part in at least some of those ceremonies to show just how much they admired the Pope. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Vatican City.
And Canada's Governor General is weighing in on the passing of the Pope. Mary Simon says the pontiff's apology to Indigenous people in Canada was a testament to the values he held dear during his time as Pope. It was a landmark moment in the history of residential schools, and as CTV's Ellison Hurst reports, leaders from Indigenous communities across Canada are now outlining what the move meant for truth and reconciliation.
The Pope's 2022 visit to Canada had an historic step toward reconciliation.
In confronting the scandal of evil,
despite pushback, Pope Francis apologized to Indigenous peoples for the role the Catholic Church played in running residential schools and the devastating abuse children experienced.
I remember how eloquently and genuinely and softly he spoke to us as Aboriginal people. And he was committed to coming to various parts of Canada to help all of us heal and to bring us all back together as one.
Roughly 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend residential schools over a century, and the Catholic Church ran about 60% of the institutions.
I remember his commitment, his dedication to reconciling the divide and the differences between the Aboriginal people of Canada and the Church.
Some survivors have called the apology an important part of their healing journey, but others expressed the words were not enough without action.
It's a complicated issue for Indigenous peoples. There's no one way of looking at it, and of course, not all Indigenous peoples are part of the Catholic Church, so don't really have any opinion on it one way or another.
A statement from Governor General Mary Simon says in part, Pope Francis's apology was a testament to his commitment to respect, dialogue, and collaboration across cultures and faiths, values he held dear throughout his papacy.
While the apology was good for many of the survivors who really needed it and wanted it, and it was a recommendation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there's a lot of other things, like releasing the rest of the documents so that we can locate some of these missing children, unmarked graves, and all of that kind of unfinished business.
It's that unfinished business many hope the next Pope and Church as a whole will push forward.
I do sincerely hope that as they move into this process of selecting the next Pope, that they keep in mind the voices of Indigenous peoples all around the world
as they continue to work toward reconciliation. Allison Hurst, CTV News.
All right, please do stay tuned. I'll be right back with what is looking like a pretty nice weather forecast for the rest of the week. Stay tuned.